Hello again, and welcome to another Afternoon Idle. I'm Andrew. I'm a certified mindfulness coach in the Unified Mindfulness System. I'm an ordained Buddhist priest, a currently not announcing any wrestling events since there aren't any, but I'm also a wrestling announcer. I'm a computer programmer. I'm a number of things, comic book fan. But what I'm not is a licensed therapist, licensed social worker, or a mental health professional. This is our little opportunity to pause in your day. So it's afternoon for folks on the East Coast. If you're in the mountain region or Pacific or Alaska, it is still technically morning. So good morning to those folks. Hello, Sarah, and anyone else dialing in today. I guess you're not really dialing in, but today is today's a bit of a somber day, or at least I believe it calls forth or warrants a bit of somberness. Hello, Selvin. So today is, in the United States, today is referred to as Veterans Day, but I think Canada gets it right, and they refer to today as Remembrance Day. And actually, in Canada, if you've ever been, if you live in Canada or you're in Canada, in November, you'll find people wearing red poppies during November, and that's the symbol for Remembrance Day, and they do that the whole month. So you'll find it at convenience stores and people sort of selling them for charity donations. So I wanted to kind of think a bit about honoring Remembrance Day a bit with what we're going to do today. So each of these days I'm playing with an idea around contrasting a technique, doing something, with the non-technique of doing nothing, or the seemingly non-technique, perhaps would be one way to put it. And in doing that, we can begin to kind of look at the fact, we can sort of think of the awareness that we have is available to us as a spotlight. It can be very narrow and one-pointed, or as a more wider aperture, a lantern. And so when we use that as a metaphor for talking about it, then we think about it very much in a bias towards sight. But that lantern awareness, or that narrow awareness, is available to us in the other sense categories. The Unified Mindfulness System comes from Shinzen Young's practice, and he looks at a way for us to amplify meeting our experience through the abstraction of having three categories. The one for visual, both inner and outer, one for auditory, inner and outer, and then one for somatic, both external and or external body sensations and somatic. And what I was thinking about today is to look at, we've been doing things for here, and I wanted to look at the hearing around where you are. So where your sensory experience is, sort of the ability to hear around that. Some of you know I do a lot of video editing, or in the past I've done a lot of video editing for the Do Nothing Project. And in doing that, you spend a lot of time with a particular audio clip, and you begin to hear what's referred to as room tone for wherever the recording had taken place. And so that room tone is something that's almost like the auditory equivalent of nose blindness. So you become used to it to the point where you sort of begin to filter it out. So that's one idea that I was thinking would be somewhat interesting, is this idea of being able to kind of hear around us. There is a directionality to hearing and playing a bit with that. The other is to bring in today's being Remembrance Day, that the stillness, or that sort of sound, is the sound that I have experienced when I'm in places of remembrance. So when I visited the Oklahoma City bombing site, when I've been to Ground Zero in New York, when my girlfriend and I visited Auschwitz and Birkenau, there's a a silence that is not necessarily silent. And so I want to play with that as what we look at. So so we're here so auditory, external auditory, or auditory sensations. That's conundrum or oxymoron, whatever. So auditory is what we're focusing on in the something portion. Our label will be here for that. But what we're looking at is, or how we're approaching how we pay attention is from this sort of lantern quality in being aware of our sounds around us. So here around is kind of what I'm playing with as a name for this. And then in the second half of the technique, we'll let go of that technique and we'll do nothing, which is sometimes comes under the guise of choiceless awareness. And if you have any questions before we begin, you can always ask them in chat. As always, know that the instructions are offered as experimentation or invitation. So you can try these things on. So I invite you to adopt a posture that helps you be both relaxed and alert. The quality that I like to think about is an uprightness to the posture. And in being upright, that helps us cue our nervous system into being relaxed and alert. Some spatial reminders may be helpful to have your shoulders above your hips and your nose in line with your navel. And if you're on a cushion, you may kind of sweep side to side or sort of metronome to find a good balance point. And then just kind of checking in, acknowledging that the body is going to be alive in a different way each day. So we may have tension in places that we didn't have tension in yesterday. Sort of a nod of acknowledgement to that. I tend to look for tension in the forehead, around the eyes, the jaw, the neck, the shoulders. If there's tension is particularly noticeable, I'll shrug my shoulders sort of up, tense, and then let them drop. And then checking in to see that I can breathe freely, so my belly is not constricted or contracted. And then finally, our breath. Breathing in through the nose in order to slow that down. Breathing low into the lungs. So low and slow is our tempo. As the wise Beastie Boys once said. Breathing in through the nose, we offer a back pressure that helps slow us down. And then that slow in-breath allows us to more effectively fill the lower portion of the lungs. And just accentuating the exhale helps us settle. It's the downward motion, as Jeff Warren says. So with any technique, it's really about two things: what we're paying attention to and how we're paying attention to it. So our what is in the auditory range, so sounds around us. And I'm inviting you to experiment with shifting the how as a more directional, or hearing the space that's around us. As we notice that, we will soak our attention in and optionally label here. We can do so with a pace and a mental tone that's pleasing. So I'll let you experiment with here, around for a bit now. So if you're not connecting with this invitation to hear around you, one modification might be to just consider things. What direction do you hear them? And in this invitation, or this sort of modification, if you will, we don't need to label, or we can just label it with the same label here. So I can hear sounds in this direction. And there's a knowing of the direction. And we can be okay with just having the knowing and not labeling it in a particular direction. So it's not north or west or north-northwest or any of that. We'll just get lost in thought. So if you're not hearing around the space, then try that. As always, our attention will be drawn away, itch on the face, pain in the foot, mental image. Each time that happens, there's an opportunity to notice, and then before you categorize that as good or bad or any of that, just pause in that noticing and be aware of not being aware, or aware of not being on within our focus range, and bring the attention back. So if you've been able to get into this idea of hearing around you, or connected with directions of sound, or if none of that landed, all of those cases is that we're skillfully applying effort. For the remainder of our time, we just want to coast, let go of that effort. We can allow our attention to be free range, just let it go where it's drawn. So do nothing. So as we practice this do nothing technique, one way of implementing the technique is to consider that whenever we're trying to influence or direct our attention, then we're doing something. So we would let go of that. And then invariably we'll try to control our attention again. And then we'll let go of that. And then we'll decide we don't like having to keep letting go, so we're going to do something. We let go of that. So in this choiceless awareness, we're creating so many more opportunities to not push or pull on our experience. In not doing that, we're training our equanimity. If your eyes have been closed, I invite you to open them and to connect to your surroundings. You may find moving and taking your time to be more helpful. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for joining me today. Again, if you have questions, I can attempt to respond, or reports, you can always share those. Just as a quick aside to share with anybody that is watching, the folks at Juliana Ray hosted a Ask Me Anything session with Shinzen Young last night. And just to share, because I mentioned that bit about the equanimity at the end, that the definition of that is to not push or pull on your sensory experience. So that means that whatever's going on in our sensory experience, that we're not, kind of holding on to or trying to push things away. What that is definitely not saying is that you can't push or pull on the world, or that you can't push or pull in a way to better the conditions and such for you and individuals around you. So that equanimity is Jeff says, this sort of smoothness or ballast of being able to stay afloat in rough waters. Perhaps would be one, probably two on point, but it's about the sensory experience. We talk about equanimity. It's not like saying, be a pushover and become a doormat. So just to make sure that I emphasize that. And so Shinzen pointed out in response to a question about how you can definitely push and pull on the world around you. And often you are probably called to do just that. So thank you, Selvin. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Susan. Anyone else that's tuning in later. And if there's by any chance someone tuning in from Poland, happy Independence Day. When we visited Poland, everyone was remarkably amazing to my girlfriend and I. And today happens to be also Polish Independence. So long tradition of democracy in Poland's early days. So a nod to the folks in Poland and Krakow. All right. See you tomorrow.